Rob, and welcome to Axel's Garage. What we're doing today is we're back in the shop, and I always wanted to have a vise, right? Pretty simple thing, not an overly expensive thing for the most part, but just the vise to hold something in place, have an extra set of hands, clamp something temporarily. It's just a real convenient thing to have. And I never had one mounted to any kind of bench. I had an old vise, and it's actually right here. It's a nice heavy old vise, small 4-inch unit, and I had this underneath my workbench for years, and I used to just lay it on the floor and clamp something on it, and it flopped over. I'd use the back end of it to hammer something, and I never really had that function. And now that I was able to set up this area behind me that we did a couple videos on in our garage shop playlist, where you can click on it here. We got some countertops in, we got some cabinets, we have some electrical power, and it's starting to come together, other than the mess that I always seem to be creating on it. But today we wanted to install a vise. So we had this old 4-inch vise sitting around. It seems to work well. It's just dirty and needs to be cleaned up. One thing that I did notice on one of the jaws has a groove in the bottom, so when you clamp something in, you're not actually clamping it flat. The jaws kind of interlock, and that's probably a feature. It looks like the jaws are removable, like there's little removable plates on the inside of the jaws, and it's probably a feature for something specific. Now this is a real old vise. It's been in this garage. This garage has been in my family for 6 generations, and this vise has been stored somewhere in the garage over the years, so it probably, it's probably real old, is what I'm trying to say. So I started talking to guys at work about vices, and guys that have their own shop. Do you say vices? Is that plural? It's like a mouse and mice, a vice, vices, I don't know. But anyway, we started talking about it, and I started looking to buy one. So I hit up Harbor Freight, looked at what they have, and they have some nice options at reasonable prices. Checked the reviews online. They were horrible. Now, a vise is a heavy piece of equipment. Even a small 4-inch vise is pretty heavy. And the bigger you get, the heavier they get. They're solid, they're cast iron, they're steel. And when you start looking to buy a vise, especially if you're looking for a new, high-quality, U.S.-made vise, you're spending a lot of money for a small vise. And if you want a big 6 or 8-inch vise, you're really spending a lot of money. And if you look in the used market on vises, it's tremendous how much you can spend on an old vise that's in good shape and functions well. A ridiculous amount of money. We went part shopping not too long ago off a Craigslist ad up in Connecticut, and when we went in the guy's shop, he had vices everywhere, and he was a vise collector. And he would get them in, and he would restore them and rebuild them. Some of them he would sell, some of them he would keep. Why he would collect vices, I don't know, but that's just what he did. And he had ones, $500, $800, $1,200, big monster units. I was just looking for a little something on. This is like a clean work area, so I just needed something to pretty much hold maybe an extra set of hands when I'm doing some soldering. Nothing crazy, so a 4-inch vise would suffice. So the one I had was fine, except for that groove in the jaw that I really wasn't crazy about. I was going to try to grind it off, but one of the guys at work said, listen, I got a couple in my garage that I'm never going to use. They've been in the back of the garage for decades. You could have one of mine. So he gave me one of his, which is another 4-inch unit that I have over here. And they're very similar units. They're probably made around the same era. It seems that mine is a couple pounds more. It seems to be a little bit heavier. This one, still heavy, in a little better shape. The jaws are in a little better shape, so I'm going to mount this one up on the bench. So now, looking at the vise, I said, well, let me clean it up and lube it up before I mount it, because it does swivel on its base. So I took the base apart, and that's pretty much, you have your lock, where you got your thing with the bar that slides in so that you can lock it down and swivel it and lock it, and coming up from underneath it is a little stud. So I unscrewed that all the way, and then the base underneath it is just held in by a center bolt that just screws in there and holds the two pieces together, and the lock locks it down. And I did notice that it's really not machined all that well, and that could be why they don't swivel all that smooth and it's dry and no lube. So I figured a little bit of cleanup on this, just with a little wire wheel and some lube. Put the base plate back on and the thing will move nice. And if it gets gunked up, you could always just take it apart and clean it up. I don't know if this is something that's supposed to have lube or not supposed to have lube, but hey, a little lube can't hurt. So I'm going to move the camera and we're going to install this vise on our new workbench countertop that we did in a previous episode. Alright, so putting the vise that we're going to use to the side for right now, we just want to figure out where we want to mount the vise. And I know I want to put it on the corner, and the nice thing about having it on the corner is if we mount it in on the corner, alright, the way the swivel will operate is we'll be able to swivel it to this side and we'll be able to swivel it to this side. So we can work on both sides of the workbench with one vise. And I think that's a good option. If we mount it just on one side, when you swivel it around, this one doesn't swivel that great either. When you swivel it around, you're kind of restricted as far as how much you can bring it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to position it in a spot that I can use it on both sides of the workbench. This is the one we're not going to use. So I'll put that one to the side for right now. Now the base plate on the one we're going to use, like I said, it's a little rough. There's a little bit of rust on it. It's really not in bad shape. I'm just going to hit it with a wire wheel and clean it up. The same thing with the other mounting surface on the bottom of the vise. I'll just hit that real good. We'll put it back together, maybe put a little white grease on there just so it stays lubed up. Alright, so all I did was hit this with a wire wheel on a drill just to clean it up a little bit, and I am going to reassemble it with a little lithium grease in there just for good measure. So if I put this vise down so that my screw holes are within my cabinet, it's going to have to go back that far. But I want to be able to use it here, and I want to be able to use it all the way around on the other side. And it doesn't actually swivel 360 degrees, so I'm going to have to try to find the place where it swivels from. Alright, so now I'm swiveled all the way this way, and it swivels back all the way this way. So if you look at the bottom, you can see where your sweep is. You get a 180 degree swivel. So this is going to be the spot right here. I can move it to here, and I can move it to here. I don't want it hanging off a tremendous amount because we don't have a lot of room, especially towards where I'm standing. So having it like this kind of tucks it up and out of the way. Now my concern is, am I far enough in so that I'm not going to hit the inside of the cabinet itself on my because the countertop overhangs a little bit, and I don't want to hit the inside of the cabinet, so I'm going to have to measure for that. Alright, so what I did was I put some masking tape down so I could measure, and I have 3/4 of an inch overhang of the countertop on this side, and the sides of these cabinets are 3/4 of an inch as well. So that's 1.5 inches that I have to come in. So if I put a mark at 1.5 inches and a mark at 1.5 inches, alright, so there's my mark of where I have to be. I got to be on this side. Alright, now in the front it's a little more difficult because I really can't get in there, so I'll have to use this to get to my initial measurement. So I'll put my thumb on it. And it is 1 5/8 to the cabinet itself. plus 3/4 of an inch. So if I come into here and I go 1 5/8 inches and plus 3/4 of an inch. So I'll put 2 lines at 2 3/8. Alright, so there's my line. So I know I'm no good here and I'm no good here. Now I can move my vise back and position it. I want to give it a little extra space, just enough over here. You know, I don't want to put the hole right on the edge because I still have to get a nut on the other side in a washer. So I'll give it right to the end of the casting over there and right to the end of the casting over here. And like you can see, it'll swivel around, but it's not going to swivel with the, it's still usable here. That spot still usable right here. It comes down to marking that hole. Alright, so a quick measuring technique. This one just a little too loose. This one just a little too fat. And this one is just right. So this is my thickness of the bolt that I want to use. Now I just got to get the length. I know my countertops are 1 1/2 inches. I know there's nothing underneath the countertops in this corner of the cabinet itself. So I got 1 1/2 inches plus this, which is roughly 1/4 inch, and then enough for the nut on it, which is another 1/4 inch. So it's 1 1/2 inches, and 1/4 is 1 3/4 inches. And then another 1/4 for the nut is 2 inches, and then another 1/4 for, which will give me plenty of room for a washer on each side. So that's 2 1/4 inches. So I need 2 1/4 inch bolts, nuts, and washers in this thickness, whatever this is, and that'll get me down. And I'm gonna need 3 of them because there's 3 holes. All right, so I'm looking for 2 1/4. Turns out I had 2 2 1/2s. I didn't have 3 of anything. This is my hardened hardware. It really doesn't require hardened bolts. I like them because they don't rust, but this is in the garage. I'm not really concerned about them rusting, so I'm going to head over to the place I always wind up going to when I need hardware, and it's Ace because it's real close and they have a good selection of hardware. So I'm going to head over to Ace and I'm going to get 3 of these bolts. It turns out that 7/16 is the size. And I need either 2 1/4 or 2 1/2 inch long. Both will work. Even longer will work, but you don't want to go too long because then it's just protruding into the cabinet and it doesn't need to be. So if I can go 2 1/4, I like that. Otherwise 2 1/2. And then I need a nut for each one, and I need 2 washers for each one. From Ace, the selection there is usually pretty good. Problem being, I needed a 7/16 bolt to get this in here nice and snug, but at Ace they only carry 7/16 in hardened. They didn't have it in regular grade 5 and they didn't have it in stainless, so I had to go with a hardened bolt to fill that 7/16. Right. Back here we have our drill, 7/16 drill bit, and we got our 3 holes marked. Try to get them right in the middle. It's going through soft wood, so you should be able, you don't need to center punch it. You should be able to get it. Turn the vise over. I did get a washer for the top of each hole. Alright, now once they're all in, I'm going to put a nut and a fender washer underneath to disperse some of the pulling weight. If you're pulling and prying, put a little fender washer underneath to give you a little bit more surface area. I got a couple of different size fender washers, whatever. The biggest one I can fit in there is what I'm going to use. And that's pretty much it. We finally got our vise in place. It swivels nice, it locks down nice, it clamps nice. I can use it on both sides of the bench. I'm happy I finally got a vise. So I'm going to call one of the kids in here and put their finger in the vise. That's all we got today from Axel's Garage. We'll see you next time.